Last week, we concluded our series on coming to Jesus. And we concluded it with this verse out of Luke chapter 9. If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. It's a great verse, honestly. It perfectly covers the transition we're starting to make today. The transition between coming to Jesus and then following after Jesus. I mean, the coming I think we get. Coming to Jesus, we do that because we have needs. We come to Jesus because we need rest. We come to Jesus because we need peace. And those are some of the things we covered over the past month or so. But if we're honest, there are a lot of reasons why people come to Jesus. There are a lot of needs that we bring to Him. People come to Jesus in the face of a tragedy that they can't understand. People come to Jesus when they're having pain that they just can't endure. People will come to Jesus when they're facing hardship beyond what they can face. Sometimes people will come to Jesus just out of simple curiosity, wanting to understand what all this is about, what's going on, why it matters. Some people come to Jesus just to challenge Him. As the whole, if you are the Son of God, then do this, then do that, prove it. Others come to Jesus to bargain with Him. Now, Jesus, if you'll fix this in my life, I'll do that. Some people come to Jesus to improve some part of their life. They think that serving Jesus, giving yourself to Jesus, coming to Jesus means that your life is going to magically get all better. I mean, there are lots of reasons. Jesus responded to those reasons in a lot of different ways. Typically, to those who were in pain and who were hurting, He gave compassion. And to those who were just kind of wanting to see what was going on, He was actually kind of challenging to them, calling them to move beyond just their curiosity to the heart of what was going on. And of course, for those who were coming to challenge Him, He had some pretty hard things to say. In fact, if there's anybody Jesus was condemning of, it was those who came to challenge Him in the first place. But for all the different reasons that people came and come to Jesus, He kept pointing them to the same answer. This one right here. Come to me, that's fine. But when you come, His answer is deny yourself and follow me. And that doesn't make much sense if all you're looking for is some comfort. If you're just coming to get some answers to your life. If you're wanting God to kind of work things out, being told to come and die to yourself and follow me seems a bit high of a price. But the cost of discipleship, the cost of following Jesus, is something that really does not make any sense until you understand the ultimate reason for coming to Him. The reason that He kept trying to bring people around to understand. We come to Jesus for salvation. Because there's no other way. There's no other means for the salvation that He can offer. The eternal, unchanging peace with God that He purchased. And in light of that, the cost of being His disciple begins to make sense. In light of that, in fact, it seems like a pretty good deal. And so to those who will come, ready to die to themselves, ready to admit, it is going to be a struggle, day after day, to choose God and His kingdom, to leave this world behind and to follow Christ. To those people, God says, follow me. And that's where we're going to spend the next several weeks, asking what it means to answer that call. And today we begin with a call to follow that probably I would think stands out in our minds more than any. You know the story. It's the time where Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. It was early in his ministry. He comes to the boat, the two boats there, and he calls out to Simon Peter and his brother Andrew, and he says, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." You know the scene. It's morning. The boats are in. Jesus comes up there. These guys, first it's Simon Peter. He calls him Simon. He later calls him Peter. Peter, his brother Andrew. There's another boat with James and John. They're mending and cleaning their nets. They've been fishing all night because as a professional fisherman, that's when you fish. That's when you catch the fish. They had caught nothing. See, the story, the verse we're using comes out of Mark 1, but there's a lot more of it in Luke 5. And we learned that this isn't like just a little bitty boat. This isn't a two-person boat. This is a big boat. Because you've got two guys who are kind of in charge. Peter is going to be in charge anywhere he goes. And he's got helpers just for his boat. So, I mean, we're talking 6, 8 people on this boat. And then there's Zebedee's boat. And it's the same situation. He's got 2 of his sons and a bunch of people helping him over there. And they hadn't caught anything. And Jesus comes up and he tells them, "Go out again and cast your nets over there." And Peter, he goes out. And his net is so full, I mean, it is threatening to swamp the boat. Zebedee goes out, takes his boat out, and the 2 of them are fighting to bring in this giant catch. They come back to shore, and it's then that Jesus calls to Peter and Andrew. And when Zebedee's boat gets back in, he calls James and John. It's the same thing. And I want us to take some time to look at Jesus' call to these 4 men. And to see what this says about following Christ in general, and also what it means and might mean specifically for us. That call, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Well, first of all, he says, "Follow me." There's no debate, there's no discussion. Jesus is clearly commanding these 4 men, stop what you're doing, stop your lives right where they are, and submit to his leadership and go. That's really saying something for Peter. I mean, Peter is the kind of guy, he's not even the oldest, but he's in charge. I mean, the oldest would have been Zebedee over there. He's got 2 sons Peter's age. Peter, we learn, owns this boat. It may have been his father's, that makes sense. But man, like I said, if Peter's going to be somewhere, Peter is in charge. And here Jesus comes along, he says, "Follow me." Well, first he says, "Go out there and catch fish in the middle of the day after you just failed." And Peter does. Peter obeys Christ. And then he drags everybody around him into obeying Christ. And clearly, Peter was in charge of these boats and these men. And yet, after that catch and bringing it in, when Jesus says, "Follow me," he drops everything. He leaves it all behind. He follows Jesus. Some people like to make a big deal over, the fact that they didn't know Jesus before this point. That's pretty unlikely. Now, if you look at Mark, this is one of the very first verses in the entire book. It's like Mark 17. That would be confusing, but it's in Luke chapter 5. It's the same story. And it is early in the ministry, but Jesus started his ministry around through Galilee and specifically in Capernaum. And that was Peter's town, Capernaum. So in all likelihood, they had heard Jesus. They at least knew of him. They may have seen him teach. They may have seen some miracles. It wasn't like this guy was a complete unknown to him. But at that point, all they had was knowing about Jesus. Now they were being called to follow Jesus. Second, Jesus' call on their lives interrupts their lives. Of the 12 disciples, we'll see some are called specifically like this by Jesus. Some others are led to Jesus. Andrew was always bringing people to Christ. It was great. Others, we don't know what their story is. We can read through the Bible outside of the main 12. There are other disciples. There are other people who wanted to be disciples. We can look at some of their stories. There are some who came to Jesus saying, "I'm following you." Those didn't always turn out too well. But here, these men were being called to Christ. And those who Jesus calls, those who Jesus comes to and says, "Follow me," it is on His terms. There's no negotiation. There's really no discussion. They may have known about Jesus, but they sure didn't know what they were getting themselves into. One minute they're going about their lives. Then Jesus shows up and He interrupts everything. They were doing this. They were going this way. And Jesus says, "Follow me." And then they weren't. They stopped where they were and they followed Jesus. "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." Third, when we follow Jesus, He remakes us. Jesus called men from all walks of life. Here, they're fishermen. He called tax collectors, doctors, terrorists, thieves. Whatever they were before, Jesus has a new purpose for them. And He doesn't just say, "You're going to be doing this now." No, He says, "I am going to make you the kind of people that will fulfill my purposes." I don't know about you, I find that very encouraging. Because that says, whatever you are, whatever you were, it doesn't matter. Because Jesus can and will remake you in such a way that you will be useful and have a meaningful purpose in His kingdom. Whatever you bring to the table, good, bad, indifferent, Jesus will make something of you that can change the world. But fourth, Jesus doesn't just dump everything you are. Jesus uses what you already are as well. Yes, Jesus remakes you, but He doesn't abandon what you were. Here Jesus is talking to boatloads of professional fishermen. And what does He tell them? "Follow me and I will make you" what? Fishers of men. Fishermen become fishers of men. Now, Jesus took them from the fishing, and from the evidence in the Bible, it was never His intention that they go back to fishing for a living. But when He made His call to them, He made it in terms of who they already were. You've been catching fish. Now you're going to be catching people. They really didn't have any clue what this would mean. They didn't know how it was going to work. But they did know that it spoke to the core of who they were. I am going to a person now who catches souls. Jesus used who they already were, and He does that with all of us. Many of you are soldiers or have been soldiers. Amazing that the Bible talks about His people being called as the soldiers of the kingdom of God. And He calls people to be soldiers for His kingdom. He charges us to assault the very gates of hell. He calls a tax collector to come and be one of His disciples. And he who was collecting the taxes from people now is collecting the tithe of nations. He calls to a doctor whose goal was to heal people. And now the doctor is going to be called to heal souls. Or in our terms today, He calls a mechanic who fixes things. He says, now your job is going to be fixing the hearts of men. He calls to a musician. And he says to them, you are no longer singing for your supper, but now you are singing for the salvation of the lost. God takes you as who you are. Whatever that looks like, whatever that may be, however it may play out, how little or nothing to do with where you came from. But Jesus is going to take who you were. He's going to take that spark. He's going to take that facet of who He created you to be in the first place. And He's going to shape who you become around that in the service of the kingdom. We all may have the same task, and that is catching people, if you will, for the kingdom. To lead others to Christ as Jesus did, and then as He did to make more fishers of men. But how that plays out varies and is based upon who Jesus makes us to be from who we were born and created to be in the first place. However, there are a lot of similarities in who God makes us to be. That's why I have the whiteboard today. Woo-hoo. I don't usually use this on Sunday mornings, so bear with me. But I thought I would just wow you with my fantastic artistic skills. Why are you laughing? That was my son. He knew something. For example, this is you. See the resemblance? Jesus says, if you will follow me, I will make you a fisher of men. It's an extended metaphor. So we're going to keep with his metaphor and go with it. So if you are a fisherman, gotta have that. If you are a fisherman, you need some stuff, right? You need rods and reels. Woo. That's right. You've got to have more than one, because if you're fishing for small fish, you need a real light rod and line, because it's a big line that you're like, yeah, I'm not touching that. But if you want to catch something a little bigger, you need the bigger one, the stronger one. And if you're going to go actually trying to catch a catfish, taking notes here. If you're going to go try to catch a catfish, you might need some real heavy line, because those guys are big and they can pull. But you got to have some equipment. If you will, these are the skills and the techniques that you can learn and be given that are going to help you be a fisherman. But you also have to have knowledge. You got to know some stuff. You got to, knowledge can't be done this, sorry. You got to know what fish go for. You got to know when they bite. You got to know not to ask Kevin about fishing, because he is bad. You got to know some stuff. This would be, in terms of our metaphor, knowledge of people, how they work, what they think, what they do. Knowledge of God, who He is. Knowledge of His Word. It is your biggest tool. But what else does a fisherman need?
Like?
What? Oh, I didn't even think about that. He's got to have a bucket. That's a good idea. See, I've only caught fish once. What? Well, that's what you carry all your stuff in. Okay, we got a tackle box. All right. Yes, sir. What does a fisherman need?
Fishing boots.
Fishing. You take fishing seriously. Okay. Seriously, guys. What does a fish need, RJ?
Bait.
Bait. Okay. Got some bait over here. Okay.
Boat.
A boat! Hello! All right, let's talk about this for just a second. A boat is what separates the hobbyist from a serious fisherman. Why is that? What? Huh? It does get you closer to the fish, but what's the big issue that your spouse has with that boat? It costs a heck of a lot of money. The boat's your buy-in. You know the definition of a boat, right? A hole in the water that money into. If you're going to be a serious fisherman, you got to have a boat. You can stand on the shore and do your best, but a serious fisherman has to have a boat. And it costs you something. It costs you a lot. But, like Becca said, the boat can get you out to where the fish are. Which brings up another matter. If you're going to be a fisherman, what else are you kind of hoping to get?
Fish.
Fish. Yeah, I'm talking you won't have a little.
And it needs water too. They're better Jesus fish. And another matter is that
The boat can get you out in the water.
the boat is below the water, so the fish might see the boat.
It's good, thanks. All right. The boat gets you out into the water. What's some interesting things about water? Let's think about these guys out there. What did they encounter out on the water with Jesus a few times?
He gets wet.
Storms. These guys are not out on Tuttle Creek. They're out on the Sea of Galilee where you from one shore can't see the next. And there are waves. I hate waves. It can be rough. Storms can come up like that. It's kind of messy. It's kind of risky. It's kind of uncomfortable. But that's where the fish are. The fish aren't nice and neat, ready to be picked up and put in your bucket. You gotta go get them. And that's what following Jesus is like. That's what discipleship is like. Jesus says, get in the boat. We're going to go here. We're going to go there. Cast your nets in this place. Cross across the sea. And that's what these guys did for 3 years. They followed Jesus everywhere he went. They heard his teaching. They got to ask him questions. They watched him heal. They watched him pray. They tried to do what he did, and sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes Jesus would be there beside them as they would try. Sometimes he sent them out by twos to do it and see how it would turn out. He gave them some schools, but some of the stuff he was honest. He's like, you're going to have to figure this stuff out as you go. He gave them knowledge of who he was, knowledge of the gospel he was calling people to. He also gave them experience. Put that up there. You can do a whole lot of fishing from your computer. Learn a lot. But until you get the bait wet, you're not learning very much. He gave them experience. He made them fishers of men. He made them seekers of lost sheep. He made them disciples. And then he told them to go and do the same. That's his model. Go out there into the water, into real life, and make disciples. The way I'm showing you to make disciples. Now let's talk for a minute about what we do. About our model of making disciples. Okay? We still give people tools. In fact, we like tools a whole lot. We give people lots and lots of different tools. All sorts of neat made. We like our equipment. We've got some really good equipment. Okay? About experience. Well, we don't really do a good job of experience. Sorry. Let's see. Oh, I know the biggest difference. We've replaced the water in the boat the schoolhouse and a desk. Give this guy a nice desk. And he's in a nice big schoolhouse. There's the teacher's bell, or little house on the prairie there, sorry. We've taken discipleship out of real life. With all of its wind and its waves and its mess. And we put it in a classroom where everything's nice and quiet and peaceful and calm. It's a very undemanding environment. And we can learn a whole lot of knowledge, but we're not doing much with it. We've replaced the buy-in of that expensive boat for what? An hour, 3 hour, 1 hour a day for 3 days a week, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. Or say an hour and a half on a Tuesday and a Thursday. Or if we want to not go to school, it's a Sunday, a Thursday. We've taken that big demand, we've really limited it now. Now let's be honest, guys. If you manage to talk your wife into letting you get that boat, what is your wife going to expect you to do with that boat? Thank you. You better not drop several grand on a boat and not go fishing. And you better catch something too. I don't care what you do with it, but if you don't catch anything, why'd you keep the boat? And we've replaced that with a model that puts us in a desk, on a schedule, that's comfortable with us, where we learn all sorts of stuff. But hey, let's be honest. We already know what about education? 50, 60, 70% of everything we learn in the school, what? We never use again. I mean, you go through, you do your time, it's kind of like prison, you do your time, you get your paper. Sorry, Emily, I just realized this is retired pretty well. That's okay. Right? You get your paper and then you move into real life. Oh, I forgot. We gotta have fish. We gotta have fish. We got fish, right? We like to take our fish, put them in a bottle, and preserve them. Because we do need an example of what we're trying to get if we ever leave the schools. If we ever decide, hey, maybe I will eventually buy that boat. Do you see a difference? Is the difference between knowing about Jesus and truly following Jesus. Jesus has invited you, even commanded you to follow beside Him in the amazing and worthy task of saving people from an eternity in hell. And it's going to cost you. It's going to interrupt your life. It's going to call you away to something that is new and kind of scary. But in the process, Jesus remakes you into someone who can and will do amazing things for His kingdom. Yet in some ways, it's not all that different in ourselves. At its core, the heart of who we are is fully expressed in who Jesus makes us to be. It all fits and works better together than you could have ever imagined. That's discipleship, not this. What Jesus did, what the 12 did, what Paul did, it is your birthright as a child of the kingdom. It is what is yours by right of coming to Christ in the first place, to be made new, to be recreated into who you were made to be in the first place. Have you ever gotten that? It's meant to happen out in life. talk about in Sunday school. Making any difference beyond that hour. Is what we are doing here doing anything more than just giving you something to think about? Ladies, y'all have Bible studies every week. But does it ever move outside of that room? We're really good at gathering together. Even looking at the Bible. But Jesus took these guys out of their life and He dragged them around with Him everywhere He went for 3 years. You know what they did when He was done? They found other people and dragged them around with them wherever they went. And then they kicked them out to go find people to drag around with them wherever they went. Discipleship happens in the midst of life. You can't schedule it. If you try, you're going to be frustrated. But guess what? Schedules are hard. Discipleship is what happens in the midst of life, in the middle of a crisis. It's messy. It's chaotic. It's stressful. It is also amazing, surprising, indeed life-changing. But have you ever had that? If not, demand it. Christ died and calls upon His people to do this. If you have had this, guess what? Pass it on to someone else. That's what He means when He calls us fishers of men. So what do you need to do because of what Jesus has made you to be? Are you at the point that you need to move from just knowing Jesus to honestly following Him? Is it time for the buy-in? For you to be willing to set everything else aside as secondary in importance to following Jesus wherever He leads you? Knowing it's not going to fit into your schedule, it's not going to fit into your life. It is a permanent interruption in your plans. And you have to lay your life down to follow this. Do you need to devote yourself to that process of being remade? Again, it doesn't happen in a room. It happens in the midst of real life as problems pop up in your life, the lives of others around you. It happens in crisis and conflict and failure. It happens in the midst of joy and peace. It happens as you realize you need Christ because you can't handle what you're facing. It happens as the wonderful blessings of His kingdom come upon you and you realize, I don't deserve this. And you just lay it back before Him and it changes you. It's not about changing some part of your life. I think a lot of churches over the years have focused on, well, if this is your problem, well, let's fix that. That's great. We all have problems. We all have struggles, and we do need them fixed. But you know what? Fixing the little problems of your life is not what it's about. It's about your whole life being changed and transformed by Christ. If you just focus on one little part, you know, by the time you got to the fifth problem, the first one's back. You got to start at the base. You've got to lay down your life. Pick up your cross. And choose to follow Christ. He'll deal with the other problems. You will deal with them with Him. But that's the process of changing. You've got to start with it all. And if you've had any of that, what are you doing with it? What are you doing with the life that Christ has transformed in you? This is your birthright, not this. Definitely not a pickled fish. Your birthright in the kingdom of heaven is to be made new by God who created you. to be purposed and equipped for His will, His purposes. What are you doing with that? Let's pray.